Welcome back. We are in conversation with U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry. I had some questions regarding the oil and gas sector. 10 years back, no one would have thought the kind of leadership position that U.S. is in now in regards to oil and gas.
Isn't that true?
Right. Give us a sense of what to expect going forward in terms of energy supply and production in U.S. As far as oil and natural gas is concerned, and would the Trump administration give some incentives also to promote this sector?
Well, you're very intuitive that you catch the 15 years ago there was a speech being given called Peak Oil that would found it all, that even if there were any discoveries, they were going to be exorbitantly expensive to produce, and they were going to be harmful to the environment. That was the conventional wisdom. There were some people who didn't buy into that. George Mitchell, a Texas and a Texas A&M graduate, I may add, who believed that hydraulic fracturing could allow for the development of tight shell formation and develop that gas economically. Coupled with some work done at national labs at the Department of Energy for the concept of directional drilling, and those two together changed the world, literally changed the world. Where the United States now is the '1 oil and gas producing country in the world. 15 years ago, there were people standing around wringing their hands, and in the 70s, the Carter administration basically said, we're done. We'll just have to regulate our way forward, and hopefully we'll make it. Innovation rather than regulation is the mantra of this administration. And that innovation that comes out of national labs, that comes out of partnerships with institutions right here in India that we're working on developing, the private sector, the future is incredibly bright. So we expect to partner with not only the government but with the private sector in India as well, from the standpoint of bringing technologies here. And across the board, whether it's technologies dealing in the oil and gas side of things, whether it's technologies on solar, whether it's technologies on wind energy, technologies in the nuclear field. I mean, again, a broad portfolio of energy resources is really important. How do you develop the grid here? What are the technologies to be able to move this energy and getting it into the communities that today don't have energy? It changes their lives forever, and that's one of the exciting things from my perspective, is to be able to tell a community in India that's never had that resource that we're going to make sure that you have every opportunity that somebody living in Delhi has, and you may be hundreds of miles from here and seemingly never going to be on the end of the line, but there's some technologies that are out there that will bring power to those communities, lights to those communities in the middle of the night if it's needed and required, and the educational opportunities, the safety that go with that can't be overstated.
I had some questions, supplementary questions on oil. Let me see if you can respond to that. If you look at some recent developments regarding missiles being sent into Syria, you have Saudi Houthi rebels firing missiles at Saudi oil fields. You have, of course, Iran. So the question that I wanted to ask you is how much of a geopolitical premium is built into oil right now? What is your sense?
Yeah, I think a substantial amount. There will not be disruptions of the United States oil and gas fields that potentially could occur, as we see in some of the areas of the Middle East and other places around the world. So the stability of that supply chain, I think, is really important. Not to mention that what are the alternatives? If the alternative is Russia, if the alternative is China, And listen, we're going to do business around the world. I think it's wise for us to do business around the world. But who's the one you are most comfortable with? Who's the individual? What is the country that best reflects your values? Mm-hmm. And India and the United States, whether it's culturally, whether it's from the standpoint of how we're structured and the democratic way that we're structured, the freedom of religion that goes into this country, the economic belief in rule of law and economic prosperity and growth and the middle class. I think that's important to the average citizen in India.
Given the way you explained this issue and the fact that OPEC has also put a cap on the production, do we then see some super spikes in oil prices going forward? What's the range that you see?
Well, we don't do pricing. We try to be thoughtful in our regulation, be predictable in our regulation, and then get out of the way and let the market find its happy place, if you will. So, what OPEC and others do relative to their markets, that's their business. What we're interested in is being innovators, developing a resource that we can sell around the world, open new markets, and in doing that, make new friends around the world.
Right. A quick question on, again, how do you see this upcoming IPO by Aramco, and what does it mean for the global energy markets?
Yeah. I'm a very big fan of the Crown Prince. I think he is a visionary, thoughtful, dynamic young leader who has obviously Saudi Arabia's best interest in mind. I think he is going to bring a new day and a new vision to the country that is very good, and I think it's good for the region. With that said, he's sitting on one of the great companies in the world, privately held, if you will, at this particular point in time. Opening that up to an IPO, I think makes sense. What that price is going to be, where they're going to place it in the marketplace, which market they're going to go, whether it's London, whether it's the U.S., whichever market. Those are their choices, and I wouldn't interfere even if I could. But I'm very confident that the future of Saudi Arabia is bright. It's good. I think their ability to continue to be an influence in the world market that's not going to change. I really like this individual's leadership. When he becomes the king, I think Saudi Arabia will be well served.
For my last question, I want to pull you out of the energy sector and want to have a question on a policy which the Trump administration has been following, and that is related to trade. We have seen both U.S. and China put trade-related and tariff-related restrictions on each other. But will that strategy work? Because while U.S. increases tariffs, so has China.
Yeah.
Net, does it benefit everyone? And do you see this continuing going forward?
We live in a complex world. So the idea that you can push the balloon over here and not realize it's going to pooch out over here, if you will, reality is reality. So I think the president is absolutely correct in sending the message to China that we're going to demand that you be fair in your trade policies, that you do not manipulate the market because you're not a free market. When that happens, there's always unintended consequences. The old analogy that you shoot the culprit here, but the bullet goes through the culprit and hits somebody behind. Be sure where you're shooting. Make sure you haven't used too big a bullet, and or too powerful a bullet to alleviate a problem that you have. It is a sensitive issue. The president is a very good negotiator. He's got people around him like Larry Kudlow who are bright, capable individuals. Their goal is to make America competitive in the global marketplace, to protect against protectionist policies that some countries have put into place. And with all that said, realizing that it's not going to be the simplest thing in the world is to say, well, we're going to put a tariff here and everything we all live happily ever after. It will be a continual process, I will suggest, of give and take. But this president knows who his friends and his partners are. And Prime Minister Modi and President Trump clearly not only have a personal relationship, but a professional relationship that will serve both countries very well.
Thank you, Secretary Perry, for joining CNBC TV 18. That was U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry joining CNBC TV 18, explaining how U.S. is now focusing on sharing its prowess in the energy sector with countries like India and what it means for the energy markets. Thanks for watching CNBC TV 18.